All right, we've been busy as all hell trying to get people their preps out here over this wild World War III weekend. I've had a chance to analyze the data of today. Here is the output. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife Sarah happen to be holed up currently in a luxury mansion with a deep underground nuclear bunker. And it's not actually owned by the Israeli government. Go figure, it's actually owned by a U.S. billionaire, Simon Falik, and comes with high security. This is not only to protect Netanyahu from the end of the world as we know it, whether it comes by the Iranians or through some end consequence of the cryptic messages currently being uttered by Iranian militias across the Middle East that appear to be hinting at some sort of major event in one of Israel's nuclear facilities. But that's inconclusive at that point. We'll keep you up to date on that one. But it's also to protect him, of course, against Hamas rockets and his own population, who are infuriated at Benjamin Netanyahu for a variety of reasons that were there before this war started, but also because he hasn't been able to effectively neutralize Hamas yet. It appears as though it's going to be a long time before he does, because you see they keep creating more combatants. Every civilian you take out, you create another 3 combatants. This is a absolutely terrible losing strategy that is in the span of 3 weeks lost them nearly the support of the entire planet. Originally, almost 90% of people agreed that this was an absolutely heinous atrocity committed by Hamas, one of the worst things ever perpetuated against the Israeli state. Now you have 90% of the people in the world, the biggest protests I've ever seen in my life, from London to New York to Istanbul, where 1.5 million people today gathered to listen to President Erdogan slander the Israeli government. And in some people's minds, rightly so, for some of the atrocities they themselves are committing. So, in the span of 3 weeks, they completely shit the bed. They had an opportunity to do this right, but they blew it. This is what happens when you spray and pray. They could have taken some time. They could have deflected the rockets. They could have made a plan. This is what we're going to do. We're going to have humanitarian contingency in place. We're not going to put out a bunch of easily debunked propaganda fluff. We are going to do this right. Instead, they went in there guns blazing. And guess what? Now we have the United States military heading there in mass. We are talking about 73 warships, 41 of which will belong to the United States, as well as submarines, an undisclosed amount that we do not know, are going to be converging on the Middle East from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, to not the Caspian Sea, the Red Sea as well. And in addition to that, according to Iranian media, and I should say 30 of those warships are actually NATO warships, and apparently there's some other Italian warships that are heading in that direction as well. So you have this huge amassing of force, okay? You apparently have 50 plane loads of cargo, those big-ass military planes, I can't remember what they're called, C something or others, and they've been going back and forth into the Middle Eastern regions for the last 24 hours, and that was the data I received 12 hours ago. Are they bringing supplies? Are they bringing manpower? Are they doing evac? Are they doing a little bit of both? I guess we won't know. A lot of this right now is, if not confidential, is being kept on the low. According to Iranian media, now take this one with a grain of salt, the Iranian-based Tasnim news agency on Saturday says, and just remember, where there's smoke, there's fire. So even if this is not entirely true, I do believe that there's a little bit of truth to it. And at this point in time, understand that they're not going to tell us everything, because that would go against national security interest or whatever sort of objective they have. I'm not going to say that what they're doing over there right now has our national security truly in mind, or if it's just a racket. They are claiming that there are 5,000 troops that have taken part in Israel's ground operation in the Gaza Strip that was said to have begun last night. But apparently, they're not making a whole lot of inroads at this point in time, or at least that's based on a lot of the information that we are currently receiving. They don't appear to be penetrating that deep yet. In fact, some people think that they went in there They got a few armored personnel carriers and a few tanks murked, and they turned around, and they're minimizing and downplaying their casualties. Just like the Ukraine war, we're getting a fog of war situation where both sides are lying about the numbers because they don't want to spook the population. Remember, the Israelis, they have a limited amount of manpower. 300,000 troops sounds like a lot. However, a lot of those troops are reservists. They're not tip-top shape. I think 100,000 or so are active military personnel, and you need that 3-to-1 advantage at least if you are going to be fighting an invading force. And that's a conventional force. That's not an asymmetrical force that hides in tunnels. What we have here is a situation just like we seen in Mariupol, where those guys were holed up in the Azovstal plant, or even in Bakhmut, where they had this same type of underground tunnel situation. And look how long that dragged on for. Bakhmut was 80,000 strong population. We're talking about 2.2 million people. And because they're only targeting like one terrorist for every 90 civilians, I'm just guessing here, it's all of those dead civilians are just creating more combatants. So the more combatants, the more civilians they take out, the more combatants they make. So the more recruits Hamas has. They have an endless pipeline, and all of their population is young and very easy to indoctrinate. So what that means is that they have an endless supply of manpower, and they have a very slow spend rate. If Hezbollah enters the conflict, Israel's screwed. Now, what's going to happen, because support for Israel has bottomed out. I mean, you're seeing protests so big. I've never seen protests in London like the one that we're seeing today. Maybe there has been at some point in the past. But even for the COVID thing, I've never seen this. So what this means is that unless there is some black swan event, some other atrocity that can win back some sympathy for the Israeli cause, because it's already petered out clearly around the world, and it's creating all kinds of tribalistic chaos around the world, and is only fanning the flames, because the more you push back, the more we push back, and vice versa. So what's going to happen is that the United States likely will leapfrog Israel, because clearly the intention here was sending so much military hardware, 50 cargo planes full of troops and equipment, these 41 warships, among them numerous aircraft carriers. This isn't for Hamas. Come on, let's get real. Little old Hamas? I don't think so, okay? This is clearly for a much broader war that they're getting ready for. Now, the only way that the Israelis are going to maintain the level of support they need to get the job done before Hamas runs out, because it's very likely that Israeli support's going to bottom out long before Hamas runs out. And at this point, they can't, because they're committed to taking them out, which means we're going to see more, if not far, far worse. Okay? And that's why this is such a dire situation. Had the Israelis prosecuted this different from the start, we might be in a different situation. We might not, if we didn't have these massive protests in the streets, then things might be different. They might have a lot more options. But what has to happen now is that there has to be some major incident that takes attention away from the Israeli issue, because they're going to have to do a hell of a lot more damage to destroy Hamas, and I don't think they're going to be able to do it effectively. It's going to end up being a very serious quagmire of a situation that could drag on for a year. I mean, trying to take that territory. Then you still have to worry about the southern part of Gaza, where you now have 2.3 million people, or however many people are left, concentrated in a territory that is half the size. So one of the most densely populated places on Earth, I know that's not an exact statistic, but it doesn't matter, very densely populated, is going to be twice as densely populated. A completely collapsed healthcare system with a limited amount of resources. It's going to be a humanitarian disaster, which means that the protests are only going to grow even more. Now, can they somehow channel that protest energy away from Israel onto a broader war, say, with Iran? Well, before I dive in to my thoughts on that, because Netanyahu is now saying that Hamas is 90% funded by the Iranians, even though the bigwig is currently chilling in Qatar, the place where, once again, all the U.S. military equipment is, 11,000 troops, missile defense, all chilling in Qatar. Yet Netanyahu's trying to say that it's the Iranians. So they're going to start a war with Iran. I'm almost 100% convinced. I think that the Israelis only real, I'm not talking about the Israeli people, I'm talking about the corrupt government. That's why he's in the luxury mansion with the high security and the bunker. It's to protect him against his own people as well. They're going to start a war with Iran. It's not even necessarily going to be the United States who initiates it. It's going to be something maybe that the Israelis do, because now they're trying to make the case that this is 90% funded by Hamas. They've been running numerous war exercises throughout the past 2 years, simulating strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, trying to take out Iranian top brass. Now, do the Israelis have the firepower to do it? No, but that doesn't mean that they can't start some shit that now, as the American military is there, okay, it doesn't mean that they can't trigger some or provoke some kind of response from the Iranians that will bring America into the fight. And that is why America is starting to slowly and quietly roll out these war-like measures, like the one we talked about yesterday with the suspension of exports of all firearms, okay? This is why they're doing that, because a massive war is most definitely coming. They're just setting up the logistical framework for a much broader military presence in the Middle East. These are the steps that you have to take, and understand something about our adversaries. Understand something about the mindset and the perspective. Okay, I really want people to understand this now. I want you to imagine you're North Korea, or you're Iran, or you're Russia, or China, and you are surrounded, virtually surrounded by U.S. warships, planes, military bases 24/7, and you know it's just a matter of time. We live in a very, very pampered position over here in North America. We have the luxury of not having to worry about a adversarial country's warplanes skirting our international airspace along our coastlines, okay? And that's what we do over there. We've never had to experience that. If we did, it would be a total freakout. It would be pandemonium. It would be the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, look at that. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Missiles not even necessarily in, in our space, well outside, just in another country, which was adversarial, fine, but it almost brought us to the brink of nuclear war. Now, imagine you're them, the amount of restraint. Every single day, these people are preparing for Armageddon, okay? They're digging bunkers while we engage in all decadent manner of distractions, and we frivolously spend money we don't have to get more and more in debt and more unhappy. They are preparing for war every single day. And I know I'm sounding dramatic, but this is the truth. The Russians building bunkers. The North Koreans have been building vast underground networks. The Chinese have underground cities at the ready. Okay, they have fallout shelters for their populations. Even the Israelis at least have safe rooms for each one of their inhabitants. Maybe not nuclear proof like Netanyahu's going to be privy to, but the Iranians, they've been preparing for this very thing because they knew this was inevitable. They knew that being surrounded by American military bases, and I'm not talking about the failed tweet that Elon sent out that people debunked, because yes, we no longer have bases in Afghanistan and on the eastern parts of Iran, but there still are numerous military assets way closer to them, okay, than they are even close, not even close to us at all whatsoever. We have huge oceans separating us from the rest of the world. So we simply don't have the mindset capable of understanding these countries' existential predicament. This is what they've been preparing for. And we cannot muster the manpower in order to fight these countries and actually win even a full-blown nuclear war, because we're not going to have the occupying force capable thereafter of going in and locking it down. And then we'll just run the risk of losing 6 months or 1 year into the post-nuclear winter world. So the truth is here is that these countries are ready for war in ways that we simply are not. They have made, they're probably, because they're so close to the suffering and the chaos, even in Eastern Europe, you know, they're accustomed to that level of suffering. Here, it is foreign to us. Here, where we put life on a very high pedestal when it's our own, of course, we dehumanize it when it's not, we're going to be losing our frickin' minds if an actual war starts. All it's going to take is a few coffins, much less the thousands of mass burial graves that they're digging over there in Gaza right now. They're accustomed to it. I heard a good quote by one of the Palestinians. They say, we don't get PTSD because we don't have time to take a break to think about how sad we are and depressed we are. We're just trying to survive. You know, over here, it's a luxury. PTSD is a luxury. In a survival war zone, it is not. So these countries are 24/7 prepping for the end of the world as we know it. And this is why we probably will lose, because we're just too damn soft. Now, according to Douglas McGregor, we are setting the stage for war. He was the former Trump military advisor, I do believe. Colonel Douglas McGregor made himself somewhat famous for his opinions, which are somewhat contrarian on the Ukrainian-Russian war issue. Not everything I agree with 100%, but he has definitely some interesting things to say, and very knowledgeable man. We are setting the stage for war. Netanyahu is setting the path for Armageddon. Now, hearing him talk like this about Armageddon is, we'll say, different, okay? Because he's not one to be throwing those terminologies around lightly. And America thinks that the presence of our offshore naval power will act as a deterrent to the Turks, Iranians, and others in the region that might otherwise become involved in a confrontation with Israel. But he doesn't think we have that capability to do so, and I would have to agree. His famous saying, I don't know if it's his own saying, but he says it a lot, that a ship cannot fight a fort. A ship is a fool to fight a fort, because ultimately the ship will run out of supplies and resupply. And the logistical component of all of this, if we think it's bad in Ukraine, and look at Russia struggling logistically, and their country is right next to the inferior country that they are invading, and I mean inferior in terms of numerically speaking, in terms of the military capabilities, then how do we think that we can really wage a war against these massive superpowers? It's just not going to happen. It's going to go nuclear, and that is part of the problem. According to, and it's something to keep in mind with respect to what's going on with Erdogan in Turkey, before I forget, President Erdogan came out today and spoke in front of 1.5 million people in Istanbul, condemning the Israeli regime. Now, I think that this is mostly political. I think that there's very little chance that Turkey is going to directly go to conflict with the Israelis unless he finds it politically useful. Okay, it was a close race for Erdogan in Turkey, I do believe. I could be mistaken about that, but I think there was a close political race there. They've been through a lot of crazy shit, and he's going to say and do whatever he needs, and he knows that 99% Muslim population, very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, wants them to do something, may compel them to act in some way against Israel. So Israel has withdrawn all of their diplomats today. This is a major development. This is fast, okay? This is all falling apart very, very fast. So somebody else had brought up on Twitter was that pipelines transit Turkey and make their way to Israel, or that one is being built or something to that effect. All I'll say to that is that you still have pipelines sending Russian natural gas through Ukraine. There are still contracts, believe it or not. There is still Russian natural gas transiting through Ukraine into Europe during what is probably one of the greatest wars in our generation. So what does that tell you about the power of money in all this? That tells you that you can have a hot war between two countries, or even a special military operation, and you could still do some trade, okay? And that's probably what's going to continue to happen. The Turkish pipeline is not going to be compromised. They're not going to shut off Israel. I mean, it would have to get pretty far. You have a situation where Ukraine allows the transit of natural gas because they know the hand that feeds them is Europe and the United States. And if they were to completely cut off all of that Russian natural gas, the price of everything would skyrocket, and they wouldn't be able to get the support that they need to fight the war. So it's a very tangled web that we weave. According to Iran's army chief commander, the message of the recent military exercise that they conducted yesterday, all kinds of videos of it online, 200 helicopters. Some people are saying that their missile silo doors were open or something to that effect, although there's no proof of that. It's just speculation at this point. Of course, that would be a posturing of the highest order to act as a deterrence, a threat. However, it would also create some vulnerability for the Iranians. So it's kind of a do or die situation where once you reveal your hand like that, then you have no choice. There's no going back, right? Assuming that that is the biggest hand that they have to reveal. But according to that, the message at the recent military exercise, let the enemies know of Iran that Iran's armed forces have full defensive and combat readiness to deal with any threat. And based on what I've been researching with respect to the Iranian military, it's not something to be taken lightly, okay? Now, Elon Musk has restored Starlink to numerous NGOs and various relief organizations trying to help out in the Gaza Strip. I think the UN and the Red Cross, things of that nature. Now, Israel communications minister says the country will use the available means to prevent Elon Musk from providing internet access to relief groups in Gaza. So again, it's like they're trying to get the world against them in every possible way. While they might have some sort of point, because, maybe Hamas is leveraging this technology somehow, I'm quite certain that you only get Starlink access if it's authorized. When I have a Starlink, and you need it's not, they broadcast Starlink and everybody can access it. There's a process. You need the router that they sell. You need the whole 9 yards. So I don't think it's just as simple as, turning it on and everybody has internet right away. But they're certainly making it easy for people to despise the approach that they're taking. The thing to keep in mind with Elon, everybody's saying, oh, yay, Elon once again. But just remember, Elon's got a tough job. And just remember that in early September, before all this happened, he had a live stream talk with Benjamin Netanyahu. And this is after AIPAC was trying to get all his advertising pulled. AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, effectively, in the United States. Or was it the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League? They were trying to get all his funding and all his advertising pulled from the platform. And then eventually he kind of acquiesced in whatever way they were looking for, and basically outspokenly stated that, the platform doesn't promote any content that would be construed as hateful by the ADL. And, they made amends, and they put it under the guise of this talk about artificial intelligence, when the meat and potatoes of the actual talk was about, how do we combat hate on Twitter and all that stuff. But just remember, that happened 3 weeks before this event, almost like setting it up, just letting Elon know that, you better do what we tell you to do. You know what I'm saying, right? So that's the vibe I get from that. I think Elon's a smart guy, but he's scared, and he's trying to do what he can. He's playing the crowd. He's trying to read the crowd. He doesn't want to lose his Tony Stark-like appeal. So if he realizes that 90% of the world is shifting towards a perspective which is antithetical to the Israelis, then he's got to throw him a bone every once or while, or else he starts to look like the villain that he ultimately might be. Because as the saying goes, either die the hero or you become the villain. Now, the United States is increasing nuclear spending. This one is not going to get a lot of media play because everybody is fixated on, will Ukraine and Israel get the aid that they're looking for? But $20 more billion for the continued modernization of the nation's nuclear weapons stockpile and infrastructure. Probably too little, too late in terms of some strategic military analysts' point of view. $1.946 billion for naval reactors to support the operational nuclear fleet, and $2.3 billion to reduce the threat of hostile nations or terrorist groups acquiring nuclear devices, radio dispersal devices, weapons, usable material, nuclear expertise. They also want to reduce their reliance on Russian nuclear fuel. Remember, for the last couple years, the United States have been buying as much of this nuclear fuel that's specific for their reactors that only the Russians make, or that the Russians make the most of. They've been buying copious amounts of it, and in anticipation of the fact that they might someday be cut off, and they're going to need to continue to run the nuclear reactors. They're also going to be building a new type of tactical nuclear bomb, a new variant of the B-61-13 nuclear bomb, and it's going to have an explosive yield similar to that of the B-61-7 variant with a maximum yield of 360 kilotons. So they're focusing heavily on the tactical nuclear component to put on their F-35s. I guess they believe that it's a more strategic way to go, putting them on the F-35s than slapping them on, than overhauling the intercontinental ballistic missile system. Trump came out today and said, "Don't worry, if I get elected, I will continue the war with Israel and bring us even closer to World War III." And so this is a bipartisan thing, guys. It doesn't matter who's going to get elected. It's World War III. China is purchasing 15,000 drones from Iran. If you doubt the capacity of the Iranians, the Iranian industrial base, to manufacture military drones that the rest of the world wants, they're giving drones to Russia, and they're about to sign a contract to do 15,000 drones for the Chinese while they might be in the thick of a war themselves. A very capable military, and as we're seeing, drones are not making tanks obsolete yet, but that point may come where it simply won't make sense to have a tank unless you have the effective mechanisms of electronic warfare or otherwise to take out the drones, because you're just going to end up, losing $10 million piece of equipment to a $3,000 drone. So that's what we're looking at here in the future. And the Chinese right now are training whole armies. Okay, I've seen videos. They're training whole armies of guys to just sit there all day and try to master drones. Like the drone stuff you see in Ukraine with flying around and dropping the thing on the guys. The Chinese are taking it to a whole new level. Okay, they're creating like the video game generation of drone pilots, and they're about to unleash that on us, it would appear. According to Mike Johnson, the new Speaker of the House, Hamas and Hezbollah are proxies of Iran, and they're all tied in with Russia and China. I mean, it is a new axis of evil, he says. That's how we see it. So, he says it's also the biggest threat since World War II. And it's suspected that Russian GPS jamming risks fresh dangers in the Black Sea region. I'm hoping to bring on an expert in the area of GPS jamming, because it seems to be something which is a harbinger for what's to come, and might not be a good thing in the Black Sea that we have all of this shady business going on. But I got to cut it short here tonight, guys, because I got too much stuff to do around the warehouse still. We're just getting copious amounts of orders, people trying to stockpile because they don't know what's going to happen in the next week, much less months from now. So all I can say is just keep on going, keep on trucking. I'll try to continue to keep you guys informed with what I'm seeing, but it appears to be my overview of the situation is such that the United States is clearly positioning itself so that it would be very easy to get into a shooting match with a major Middle Eastern superpower. And the only one I can really think of off the top of my head is Iran, but there's also Syria, there's Iraq, there's Lebanon, there's numerous littler battles that they could wage around there. Could they effectively enter a major war with Iran immediately? Probably not. But if they position enough warships around there, maybe, just maybe, Israel can provoke Iran into trying to shoot one of those ships down. I guess we'll have to see. All the more reason to stay ready. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe. Canadian Prepper out.